Okay. Isn't that crazy? Like, it was actually perfect. Like, half of the room totally missed that, which is awesome. Because this was actually a study done. This video actually won like a massive prize because of this, because of the research done here. It's crazy how sometimes the things that are right in front of our faces, yet sometimes we fail to even see them. I mean, how? Now that you've seen the gorilla, you kind of feel silly, don't you? Like, how did I miss that? It was right there in the middle of the video. There was research that was produced specifically by this video, which when they tested on audience found that nearly half of the people who watched the video missed the gorilla. Now, most of those people also got the number of passes right, but we're not going to talk about that. Here was their conclusion on the matter. They said, "We are missing a lot of what goes on around us, and that we have no idea that we are missing so much." How could we possibly miss something so obvious, so right in front of our faces, like a gorilla walking through the middle of the very thing that all of our attention is focused on? Well, don't feel bad, okay? Because the truth is that you do this all of the time. It's actually a very important phenomenon, and it is called inattentional blindness. The basic idea is that your mind takes in so much information all of the time, every second, from all of your senses, that it has to have a way to weed through what's important in the moment. You don't remember every single detail of every single moment of every single day, right? So what's the task at hand? Your brain will ask this question: what's the task at hand? What's the core details that may need to be remembered? And what can be completely forgotten and looked over in this moment? Like, for an example, the gorilla in the middle of the video. But we do this all the time. I'm going to be that guy at camp whose stuff doesn't come up. Sorry about that. Anybody got any Y2K compliant equipment? I love how only the outsides of the room got that. That was incredible. All right, we're switching here. Maybe not. Maybe we're winging it. One time, this is a funny side story while I get this pulled up. We had this is how servant-hearted our team is at Calvary Chapel Garland. We had a Christmas fellowship or Christmas Eve candlelight service, and my pastor was doing this skit, and it's called we're gonna wing it, or we're gonna try something different, or we're gonna improvise. That's what it was. We're gonna improvise, and because the whole skit was that he forgot this candle or this lighter for this candle. And it's really not working. Wow, that's going to be fun. And so he gets up there and he does the skit and he goes, "Oh, we're going to improvise," because he didn't have the lighter. And like 6 people in the congregation was like, "I got to get a lighter for you. Don't worry, Pastor, we got." And he's like, "No, it's part of this bit." It was so funny. You had to be there, I guess. No, I'm just kidding. Rebecca, I might just ask you to advance slides because I can't do both of these. Again, so we weed through this moment. In an article written in 2010, research showed, and you can go to the next slide, why science tells us not to rely on eyewitness accounts, right? This is a scientific journal written as that, and they determined that within witness accounts of crimes, there have been discrepancies between the accounts and the truth of the eyewitnesses. They found that our minds don't work like a tape recorder documenting every single detail of the situation to be played back at a later date, but our minds more likely are to jot down specific details that our brain finds important, and our memories will actually reconstruct the events based on certain biases, based on certain presumptions and prejudice. For an example, in this article with crimes, presence of weapons was a big deal. Use of a disguise like a mask or a wig, a racial disparity between the witness and the suspect, a lack of distinctive characteristics of the suspect, such as tattoos or extreme height. All these things are details that our minds are trained to remember, but we forget all the rest of the stuff. What does it all mean? Why is this important? It means that our minds at times can play tricks on us to see things as they aren't really are. You and I have been trained, you might have heard it before, the idea that seeing is believing. Maybe you guys have heard, you guys watch the Polar Express, right? The main character in the Polar Express has this crisis of, is seeing believing? And the hobo guy on the top of the train is like, you have to see it to believe it. It must be verifiable with your eyes. But let me tell you guys, this couldn't be further from the truth. Let me give you a couple of examples of illustrations. Let me ask you, what do you see in this picture? Is it a young woman? Or do you see an old woman, right? Check it, right? So like this is it's like a young woman looking away, that's her nose, her hair, right? What about this? What if that was the eye and that's the nose and that's the mouth, right? You might perceive it. You guys might remember the, what was it, the dress thing, the blue and black or the golden white thing, right? So our mind can play tricks. Some of you guys are like, no, it has to be a young woman. I see the young woman turning her face away. What about this one? Which way is this guy facing? I know, it's really trippy, right? Because sometimes our eyes can play tricks on us. Sometimes seeing is not necessarily seeing things as they are. A common ground that Christians and non-Christians can all agree on is that there's been at some point when you've asked this question, where is God? I want to start by saying that this is an incredibly valid question. I don't want anybody here to feel belittled. I don't want anybody here to think that that question is dumb or silly. Here's why it's not a silly question. Satan is the enemy of your souls. Satan desires nothing for more than for you and I to deny the existence of God. If you could forward a couple slides to there's a C.S. Lewis writing. If you guys ever heard of the Screw Tape Letters, it's by far one of my favorite works of C.S. Lewis. I think it's the one after that. In the Screw Tape Letters, this is a satirical novel written in the form of these letters from one demon, like a superior demon to a new demon. And it says this is what he says in the Screw Tape Letters. And like the superior demon, the leader demon is trying to teach this young demon how to deceive mankind. And he says this, I wonder you should ask me whether it is essential to keep the patient in ignorance. The patient is you, in ignorance of your own existence. That question, at least for the present phase of struggle, has been answered for us by high command. Our policy for the moment is to conceal ourselves. Or, of course, this has not always been so. We are really faced with a cruel dilemma. When the humans disbelieve in our existence, we lose all pleasing results of direct terrorism, and we make no magicians. On the other hand, when they believe in us, we cannot make materialists or skeptics. It is in the best interest, actually, in Satan and his economy, for you to just not believe that there's anything spiritual going on. To just believe that everything's materialist. That everything that I see, if I can't touch it, this iPad's real because I put my hands on it and I can look at it. This room is real because if we can just get people to believe that you need to only see things to believe, it works in Satan's favor. Why? Sure, you won't believe in Satan, you won't follow Satan, but you know who else you won't follow? You won't follow God. To deny that there's any intelligence to the way that nature is designed, to deny morality and common understanding of good and evil. Have you ever thought about that for a second? Why is there a common understanding across all of mankind that like killing people is wrong? You ever thought about that? To deny the supernatural existence means that we deny God's existence. So I bring back our question, where is God? Well, I like to turn to the scriptures. So if you want to write it down or turn there, our kind of core is going to be Deuteronomy 4, verse 29, which says this. But from there, you will seek the Lord your God and you will find him. If you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul, when you are in tribulation and all these things come upon you in the latter days, you will return to the Lord your God and obey his voice. For the Lord your God is merciful God. He will not leave you or destroy you or forget the covenant with your fathers that you swore with him. I want you to take a moment this morning. And if you genuinely mean it, I want you to ask God to tear down the presuppositions in your mind and in your heart, to tear down the misconceptions, the excuses that you and I have made that distract us from seeing him clearly. Ask him to renew your heart. That's what Romans 12 tells us, to renew our minds. that we would do what this Deuteronomy passage, and it's right there in the beginning, if you want to back up to it, what's right there in the beginning. It doesn't just say, well, if you read an article, what does it say? Seek with your heart and soul. What does that leave out? No aspect of you is left out in how you seek God. So take a second, think about that. Pray that to God. God, I want to see you. Tear down anything in my life, in my heart, in my mind that is keeping me from seeing you clearly. So I titled this, Seek and Find. And there's two sections I want to go through, and this is the first one we're going to talk about is through creation. Because I think creation is magnificent and it screams of the glory of God. And so Psalm 104, 24 through 25 says, "O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them. The earth is full of all your creatures, here in the sea, great and wide, which teems with creatures innumerable, living things both small and great." That's the first place that I love, that I drop into, that I love to look at and see, wow, God, you are magnificent, you are incredible. It is undeniable to see you. And so the first one that I have, might creep some of you guys out, is, if you want to hit the next video, this little critter. This is a very, very cool testimony of God's power. It is called the bombardier beetle. Yes, bombardier beetle. And if you're looking, you will see the magnificence of God's creation within this beetle. See, this beetle is not just your stereotypical bug. It actually has a defense mechanism within it, which you are going to see right now, that when the beetle is disturbed, it ejects a hot, noxious chemical from the tip of its abdomen, and it makes a popping sound. Here it is. Yeah. Watch that. Boom. We didn't get to hear the sound, but you get the point. This happens because within the bug, it is mixing two chemicals. Oh, no, you can mute it. It's okay. We don't need to hear it. They say this is not a Christian one, and they say some pretty crazy stuff. This happens because they're mixing hydrochloroquine and hydrogen peroxide, which is fatal to a lot of the attackers of the bombardier beetle. What you see on this diagram is the outside and the inside. You see that there are two on the abdomen, like sacs. And one holds one of the chemicals and one holds the other of the chemicals. And when it mixes those two chemicals, it ignites and it pops and it burns. So here's the question I have for you guys. Why is the bombardier beetle not always in suffering from these two chemicals? Or maybe a better question, how did it evolve the ability to contain both of these chemicals within them without blowing itself up, without burning itself from the inside? It couldn't have. It couldn't have. God's perfect design of the beetle was that they would have these two different sacs holding these two different chemicals that only when the beetle sprays itself, here's another cool one, its body knows where its legs are at all time. It never sprays its own legs. You ever think about that? Like the abdomen is under there and it's like a turret gun under it and it just shoots itself. It's like, oh man, no, friendly fire, right? But it never does. Its body knows how to do that. Why? Listen. The obvious answer is the right answer here. Oh, because over millions of years, right? We talked about this last time. Millions of years, all this chance, hundreds of thousands of millions of billions of beetles dying to try and produce this. Guys, the answer is so simple. It was created intelligently that way for a purpose with those body parts. If you guys are into science, well, you guys should all look it up, but if you're really into science, go do some research on this term, irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity. The real idea of irreducible complexity is that every component of a system is required for that system. It is irreducible. You cannot take down any part of that system or it breaks down. Within the bombardier beetle, if one of those sacs isn't lined perfectly to make sure that the chemicals don't mix, the system breaks down. And as I'm going to say really famous apologist says, but I can't even remember his name, he says, dead things don't evolve. Dead things don't evolve. A second magnificent work is the giraffe. right? Beautiful, majestic. Our pastor got to go to Africa and go on a safari and actually photograph. And he comes back and he tells us just how magnificent the creatures of the animal kingdom are. But here's the thing. You guys recognize the cool thing about giraffes. They're just these really tall animals, right? And their brain's up in the top of their head, right? Well, what needs to circulate throughout their body and get all the way up to their head? Blood, right? The red thing, right? So giraffes, because of that, have an extremely powerful heart. If you want to hit the next two, right? So blood needs to pump up, and hit it one more time. But what's forcing against it? Gravity's trying to pull that blood back. No. Don't go up to the head, right? So here's the cool thing. If you turn to the next one, giraffes, the next one. The next one. The next one. The next one. Yeah, that one. If you see, these are little valves within the arteries of the giraffe. You know what they do? When the giraffe goes to bend down to drink water, well, that was the last one. I'm sorry, I got out of order. When the giraffe goes to bend down, now what's happening? Blood's still trying to go to the head, but what's also going? Gravity, right? What do you think happens when your super strong heart that's pumping blood to your brain, and now gravity's like, let me help, bro? Oh, it's way worse than dizzy. Let's just brains in the water kind of situation, right? Blood, gravity, all at the same time, all that force going straight to the brain would blow the brains of the giraffe out. So now to the next one, he'd be dead, right? And again, dead things don't evolve. But God did create them with purpose. So there are these valves here within the arteries of the giraffe, and whenever the giraffe bends down, those arteries, the pressure valves open up and release the pressure so that gravity's not now pushing all that blood down, but the pressure is released and it only gets the blood that it needs to get to the brain. Again, if it was evolved, if it took millions of years, dead things don't evolve. No, God's magnificent creation is seen in clear sight right before you. But there's another problem. Somebody talked about they would get dizzy. So, giraffe, if you want to go to the next one, giraffe's at the watering hole drinking, lion comes up. He's like drinking, he looks up, he's like, uh-oh. What does he do? Shoots his head back up. You guys ever had that sensation, that head rush? Like you get up out of a chair and you're like, right? You get dizzy and all that kind of stuff. That's because you didn't get enough, you got up and your body didn't get enough oxygen to your brain. And so you got that dizzy feeling. Functions were falling apart. So the giraffe bent down, pressure valves release, brain gets the blood, but then it jumps back up. Pressure valves are still, it's like, blood to the head. What would happen? Dead, lion, dinner, right? Ding, 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 right? But God didn't create them that way. God created them, and I'll spare you. Don't go look up sponge in the back of the brain on a giraffe on Google. You'll get real pictures of giraffe brains if you weren't ready for that. But what there is there's a little sponge on the back of the brain of the giraffe. Tiny little sponge. And what happens is when it bends down, those pressure valves release, blood goes to the head, and it soaks that sponge. So that if the giraffe has to make a quick escape, when it gets up and the blood doesn't pump quick enough or doesn't pump strong enough, there's a little sponge in the back of the brain that goes, whoosh, and it gives enough oxygenated blood to the brain. Oh, Taylor, millions of years, we have all this research, and it's so clear over millions of years that this animal, this fish, turned into this giraffe, and that's why, guys, let's be real for a moment. The answer is right in front of us. But like the gorilla in the first video, we are looking everywhere except right in front of us. Psalm 19:1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies above proclaim its handiwork. I'm glad John brought it up the other day, or yesterday, about getting that opportunity to go out and just look up at the stars. One of the ways that we can see God work is through the creation. All weekend, our time in nature has been an opportunity to see God in front of us. Have you guys ever thought about how perfect our oxygen and carbon dioxide cycles are? Science even agrees that if the plant life and the animal life was not created within hundreds of years of each other, one of them would have just died. The whole earth would be filled with carbon dioxide if it was plant or if it was humans or animals, and all plant life would be dead if it was just humans who were on the earth or animals that were on the earth. No, they needed to be intentionally designed, purposefully created, because the answer is right in front of us. How about our planet in general? Do you guys realize, I know you guys have all in some form or fashion taken some kind of earth and space or science class that talks about this, how perfectly positioned our earth is in the solar system? Any closer, you and I are hot potatoes. Any further and I, we're cold potatoes. I don't know about you guys, I was a cold potato this weekend. So these are the general ways. Again, we talked about this last night. We can talk about all this stuff all day long. I love this stuff. I eat this stuff up for breakfast. But it doesn't move us to the next step. Because the question is, where is God, right? And if we can see him in the expanse, but there are people for a long time who have seen him in the expanse. Deists across all of time. And deism is just like God exists, but he like set the world in motion like a dreidel or like a clock, and he just walked away. He's like, I'm not doing anything here. Deists would say, yeah, that's amazing. God created. Oh, how beautiful, how great, how magnificent. But they don't realize that there's more to it. And you guys are hungry for more to it. You guys want to see God in creation, want to see God worked out in the things that we experience, but I think you guys also want to see God move in your lives. I think when we ask where is God, we're not asking the question of did he create the sun? Did he make a giraffe? I think the question we're asking is, why don't I see him moving in my life? And I refer back to the gorilla video. He's right there in front of you. But you have to have the eyes to see. You have to be willing to look up from the things, the lies and the deceptions that this world is telling you to say, yes, he's right there. Consider our Deuteronomy passage for a moment. I want to bring back up the idea that seeing is not believing. See, in Scripture, we have plenty of examples of individuals who saw miraculous and supernatural moves of God, yet refused to have faith in God. For an example, in Numbers chapter 14, we read about Israel with the Promised Land. Israel's called out of Egypt, not just called out of Egypt, but delivered out of Egypt by Moses. They arrive to the Promised Land, and they're about to go into the Promised Land. And what do they say? They send some spies in, and 12 spies, of the 12 spies, only 2 came back saying, God will lead us. What did the other ones say? They're huge, right? They're huge. We can't go in there. They're going to kill us. See, they had just seen the miraculous works of God to deliver them out of Egypt, an oppressive nation. They had just seen the Egyptian army swallowed up by the sea while they walked across on dry land. They were experiencing many miracles of God. And then they come to this and they go, nah, this is too big for him. Nah, I don't trust him enough. When it was right in front of their eyes, when they knew the words of Deuteronomy. Now, they didn't physically have the words of Deuteronomy, but they had these words. They would know if you seek God with your soul and your mind, you will find him. What happens because of that? Judgment on the nation of Israel. None of those individuals got to see the Promised Land because they weren't looking at what was right in front of their eyes. This is what it says in Numbers chapter 14, verse 20. Then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of God, none of these men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test. That's the key word. Have put me to the test and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers, and none of those who despise me, shall see it. Whew. You know what's really crazy about this? It just gets deeper. You're like, man, that's such a bummer. What a consequence. It gets so much deeper than this. Genesis chapter 15, God is establishing his covenant with Abraham. And he goes, Abraham, you're going to be a mighty nation. You're going to have descendants as numerous as the stars, and you're going to inherit this land. And Abraham's like, passed out on the floor. He's like, God, this is crazy. And then he goes, but there's going to be 400 years of oppression, and then you're not going to see the land, and you're not actually going to possess it. And he prophesies right there to Abraham that there's going to be this struggle in the nation of Israel. Now, I don't know about you guys. If I was given a word like that, I would tell my kids, God said this, watch out. And I would tell them to tell their kids, God said this, watch out. And I would tell their kids, God said this, watch out. I want you guys to realize that in Numbers 14, the Israelites were not naive to the covenant of Abraham. They knew what was happening when they were judged for their disobedience, for their lack of being able to see God right in front of them. It wasn't because they didn't know. Another one that we read about in John chapter 9, verse 35, is the Pharisees. The Pharisees, this rattled my brain when I first read this. Jesus he's just cast out a demon, or he's just, not cast out a demon, he's just healed a blind man, Pool of Bethesda. Maybe not Pool of Bethesda. It's a blind man for sure. But Jesus heard them, that they had cast him out, and having found and said, do you believe in the Son of Man? This is the guy that he just healed. Didn't show back up to him, and he comes back later, and he goes, do you believe in the Son of Man? And he answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. He said, Lord, I believe, and worshiped him. You guys last night who came up here, is that the expression of your heart? Man, thank you, Lord, for the revelation of who you are in my life. I worship you with who I am. I am so magnified. You are so magnified and glorified. I'm like, thank you for healing me. Jesus said, for judgment I came into the world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who may see may become blind. That second part is the important part. Those who see may become blind. Because the Pharisees reply and say to him, are we also blind? Who are the Pharisees? The religious leaders, the dudes who spend their lives, their job is to study God, to see the Messiah, to witness his coming, to say that is him. He's the one to deliver us. And they go, Jesus, surely you're not talking about us. Are we the blind? And what does Jesus say? If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now you say we see, your guilt remains. Because who did the Pharisees so staunchly oppose his entire life? Jesus. They claimed to know the truth. They said, no, we've got it. We know what's up. We've got it figured out. And then Jesus came onto the scene, and he's fulfilling prophecies, and he's just doing everything that Ezekiel and everything Isaiah said and everything Psalms prophesies, and they're like, that ain't it. And Jesus is like, you say that you see, and you are blind. He came so that the blind, those who haven't seen, those who don't know, could see. In this section of Scripture, we see that the religious leaders, those who God, again, had tasked with the keeping of the Scriptures, which was to point them to the Messiah, missed it when he was standing right in front of them. You ever think about that? Like, I've always had this conversation with individuals and asked the question, man, when you get to heaven, who's the first person you want to talk to? Oh, man, John would be so cool. I want to know Revelation, like what that was like. Oh, it's Peter, or oh, it's Abraham. What was it like being the father of nations, right? All this kind of stuff. And then I think about the guys who experienced Jesus face on, right there, in their midst. And I wish that I could ask them, what happened? You had the Scriptures. You had it. It stood right there in front of your face. You went every single day to synagogue and you studied these things and you knew them by heart and you memorized them because they didn't have Bibles like literally all of you have sitting in front of you. They had to go to synagogue and then they'd memorize it. And then they'd go home and they'd recite it and they'd recite it and they'd recite it so that they knew it. Go, man, what happened there? It was right there in front of you. The third example that I have here is Pharaoh with Israel. This comes out of Exodus 4. It says that in Exodus 4 that Pharaoh hardened his heart against God. You guys know this. It's the 10 plagues, or if you're a Hebrew, it was the 10 miracles, right? In Exodus, God asked Pharaoh through Moses to let the Hebrew people go. I want that to be very, very clear. God was using Moses and gave Pharaoh this opportunity. He says, check it out. These are my people. I want them out of here. And I'm using Moses. Let my people go. Pharaoh had the opportunity to be an instrument used by God. In fact, he actually had 9 opportunities to be the instrument used by God. And yet he still hardened his heart. He saw 9 miracles, 9 unexplainable, unimaginable things. And you go, well, some of his magicians did it on a smaller scale, and they couldn't make it go away once it had happened. But Pharaoh hardened his heart. Each time these miraculous plagues, miraculous signs happened, he would harden his heart. It was right there in front of him, and he was missing it. In Deuteronomy chapter 11, 1 through 4, I love this section. And hopefully this is where we can walk away from camp with. This is what I want you guys to think. We always talk every year about a camp high experience. Hey, when I leave camp, why is it camp so different? Why does it make sense? I was talking to one of my youth about this. How do we continue on in this? Camp's so much fun. I feel like I really get close to Jesus. My spiritual life is just filled up. I'm so fulfilled when I come here. Deuteronomy 11, 1 through 4. You shall therefore love the Lord your God and keep his charge, his statutes, his rules, and his commandments always. And consider today, since I am not speaking to you as children who have not known or seen it, consider the discipline of the Lord your God, his greatness, his mighty hand, and his outstretched arm, his signs and his deeds that he did in Egypt to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and to all his land. And what he did to the armies of Egypt, to their horses, to their chariots, and how he made the water of the Red Sea flow over them as they pursued you, and how the Lord has destroyed them to this day. Why do I bring that up? I showed you guys creation. That is obvious right in front. See, the Israelites had the Red Sea, had the chariots, had all this stuff. In fact, they wrote a worship song. The first worship song ever recorded comes right after that section where they come and they worship God. Horse and rider are thrown into the sea. And they worship and they praise him like, you did this, Lord. And then what do they do immediately? We're in the wilderness again. This is terrible. God's not going to provide for us. Right? We laugh, and it is silly. It is silly because it's right there. I shared with you the creation accounts, the situations. Why? Because those are the opportunities we can look at and be like, God's right there. And if he is right there, I know he's right here. I know he's there in my presence, and I can trust him with my life. I can trust him with the things that I'm anxious about. I can trust him with the things that I'm depressed about. I can trust him with the things that I don't understand. How many of you guys are junior seniors? How many of you guys are absolutely stressed out with SAT, ACT? Do they still do that? Because I heard there was talks about like changing all that. SAT, ACT, college applications, all this stuff. First of all, you're not the first. Talk to somebody about it. It will be okay. But second of all, I guarantee you we could sit right now and write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and find 5 things in our historical life that we can look and say, I saw Jesus move in this. Even if it's creation stories, even if it's creation accounts, we can look at those. And here's the question I have. If we can do that, can we then obey today to continue to follow him? Notice what he says there in the beginning of it. You shall therefore love the Lord your God and do what? Keep his charge, his statutes, his rules, his commandments. There's an obedience that overflows from a recognition and a love for who God is. Obedience opens the door to see God move in miraculous ways. Can you say that again? Obedience to God, to his word, to his commandments, to his statutes is an open door to see God move in miraculous ways. Do not get me confused here, okay? Obedience is not the open door to salvation. Obedience, if I just do the 10 commandments, if I just act a certain way, God will accept me. Obedience is not the way to salvation. The free gift of grace through Jesus Christ is the door to salvation. You and I can never earn our way to heaven. What I am saying is that those who have a real relationship with God, that have come from the forgiveness of their sins through the blood of Jesus Christ and are willing to surrender to his word and his calling, It's actually from this position of humble obedience that we see God move in miraculous ways. If you agree with that, like I've been obedient to God and seen him move, can you just give me a nod? Yeah. I look around the room and so many of you guys are like, yeah, when I did that thing that God so clearly instructs us to do, it's crazy. God blessed me. Wow, that's unbelievable. But it's not just my word. Don't take my word for it. Check out the scriptures. Babylonian captivity, Daniel chapter 2. Two things happen right at the beginning of Daniel that I love. Daniel chapter 1, Daniel and his homeboys are taken into captivity, and they're like the nerds. And they're like, we want all the nerds because they can serve us really well in Babylon. And so they get them together, and then the king blesses them. They're like, eat all the food. Eat all the king's food. The problem is that the king's food broke Jewish law. The king's food broke the rules that God had given the Jews to follow. So Daniel's in this conundrum. Do I follow God? Do I be obedient to him? Or do I say, oh, well, we're already in captivity and God sent us here. It was a judgment. So I guess I can eat the king's food because I've just found favor. Daniel doesn't do that. You know what Daniel does? He goes to the guy in charge and he goes, hey, our God has forbade us to eat this food. And the guy in charge, rightly so, goes, hey, but you need to eat this food because if you're not well and you're not strong, I'll die. And he was like, okay, test this. If we will eat our food, and if we are any weaker, you are able to do whatever you want to us. If we eat kosher food, what God has commanded to us, then you are perfectly able to kill us, which is what would have happened. They would have died. And he goes, okay. He says, fine, we'll get you the veggies. That's what they ate. It was like a vegetable diet. If you ever heard of the Daniel diet, that's what it is. Or the Daniel fast, things like that. And you know what happens? God shows up. In fact, Daniel actually records that they were stronger, more capable men than all of the king's court. They weren't just like keeping up. Because of their obedience to God, God showed up in a miraculous way, and they were actually better than the rest of the guys. Imagine that. What's the other story in Daniel that everybody knows? The fiery furnace, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, a bumblebee, if you're a VeggieTales fan, right? In chapter 3, we read the fiery furnace. Daniel 3, verse 16. The King Nebuchadnezzar comes, and he's like, you guys got to bow down, and if you don't bow down, I'm going to kill you. Nice. Yeah, that's what Nebuchadnezzar saw. It's like, what's happening? They're alive! And Nebuchadnezzar gives him this one more chance. They come to him and he's like, listen, guys, I like you. You're good for my kingdom. I don't want to have to kill you, but I'm going to throw you into the fire. Renounce God. Forsake God. Bow down to my statue. Actually, he didn't even say forsake God. I don't want to put words in the Bible. He just says, just bow down to the statue. He doesn't say you can't stop worshiping Yahweh. He just says, no. Add me. Obey me. Follow me. Worship me. You can keep the Yahweh thing. That's okay. And this is what Daniel 3:16 says. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you. Imagine the president of the United States comes to you and asks you a question, and you go, I don't need to answer you. You're crazy. Why? Because they have authority, because they have power. But you know what happens when you fear God above man? You follow and you obey God above man. And this is what happens. Daniel, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, if this be so, our God whom we serve will be able to deliver us from the fiery furnace. He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set. We will not disobey that our God, God Almighty, King of kings, Lord of lords, that he is the one true God. I will not even bow down to your statue. I will not compromise for a second and say that your God is even second tier to my God. But how often are we bowing down to those things? What happens? You guys know the rest. Now, they were really awesome, and they were like, listen, they had true faith. I mean, this is true faith. hey, God can deliver us. Nebuchadnezzar, I want you to know he can. If he doesn't, praise be God that I died. Whoa, what? What do you mean? They didn't look at him and go, yeah, he's gonna save us. He's going to because health and wealth and prosperity, because God's all about me being awesome and me being good. No, he says, you know what? God is good, and if he delivers me, man, that's cool. And if he doesn't deliver me, man, that's cool. Because they had faith. And what's the end of the story? Do they die? No, but they get something even cooler. Jesus shows up in the fiery furnace. And yes, I do believe this is Jesus. Jesus shows up right there. Why? They were obedient to what was right in front of them, and they got miraculously blessed. I teach my boys, we don't have like rewards around. We say that obedience brings blessings. That's what I tell my boys. I say obedience brings blessings. Blessings are not mutually exclusive to obedience, but obedience brings blessings. I tell them all the time, my boys, and they got a lot of energy. I tell them all the time, listen, obedience brings blessings. And so they'll be like, Dad, I want to go to the park. I want to go to the park. But they haven't cleaned up. They haven't helped with anything. They've been defiant to their mother. They've been all these things. And I go to them. I'm like, listen, I really want to take you to the park. But you haven't been able to obey in these things. And so it's hard for me to bless you with these things. On the flip side, there have been many times, that my boys were obedient and they asked me for something, like we'll be coming home and they'll be like, Dad, can we go get an ice cream or a cookie or a snack? And I'll look at them and I'll be like, you know what? You have been respectful and obedient to me today. And because you asked, yes, because obedience brings blessings. Because obedience brings blessings. Again, I don't want you to get confused. It's not obedience is mutually exclusive to blessings. Like you will not be blessed if you are not obedient to God. But you will see God move in miraculous, incredible ways right in front of your face when we choose to seek after him. A second one that we have is Abraham and Sarah trusting in God with their promised son. And I like Abraham and Sarah specifically because what did they first do? Did they just like from the get-go obey? No. They actually disobeyed at first. And you see the conflict, even to this day. You guys want to see something right in front of our face? The Israel-Palestine conflict, the Israel-Arab conflict is a direct conflict that goes all the way back to Abraham and Sarah and their disobedience to the will of God. But what happens? God doesn't just like, well, get them out of here. Right? They're done. I don't want anything to do. What does he do? No. He reconvenes. He shares again the promise. No, this will be your son from your loins, Abraham. This will be your son that comes through Sarah. You will have this child. He will be the promise, and he will carry on the Abrahamic covenant. And who do they have? They have Isaac. What a blessing. What a blessing. But again, what did it come from? There was disobedience in there. But did God just throw them away? Well, I'm done with you guys. No. He reestablished, he reaffirmed. He said, come back, let's obey. And then what does he do? Boom, blessings